We'll be sending those in English and in Spanish. There's going to be an evaluation at the end, and if you could just take 1 minute to fill that out, that would be super helpful for us. Okay, so our overview for today, we are going to cover EB Mud's water supply, give you a drought update, give you a few tips on how to save water, and then we're going to go into our special presentation and talk about the benefits of trees, your tree needs, irrigation do's and don'ts, taking care of a young tree, mulching tips, transitioning trees after a lawn removal project, drought tolerant trees, and a number of very helpful tree resources. And we'll end by giving you a review of EB Mud rebates and some of our coupons, and then we will head into the discussion. Okay, so for those of you who are an EB Mud customer, 90% of our water comes from snowmelt. It's up in the McCallamy River watershed. That, if you guys are familiar with Kirkwood ski area, it's up in that part of the Sierras, and it can supply up to 325 million gallons per day. So this map kind of shows you its path right up here at the right-hand corner. That's the McCallamy River watershed. The snowmelt dumps into our reservoir, Pardee Reservoir, and then travels 90 miles down to our service area and filling local reservoirs. When we've had dry seasons, we had a couple years of drought, we do pull off the Sacramento through our Freeport pumping station. And we did start pulling water off the Freeport through our Freeport pumping station in October as a way to really buffer our reservoirs in case we go through another dry year. So this is what our service area looks like. It goes from Selby or Crockett all the way down to Hayward, from Alameda out to Walnut Creek. We serve 1.4 million customers with fresh water, and 748,000 we provide wastewater services. So a little bit about the drought. I'm sure it's no news to anyone that we have been going through some dry years for our local precipitation. It was the driest winter on record, and up in our McCallamy River watershed up in the mountains, it was the second driest winter on record. So in April, our board of directors called drought stage 1, and that calls for our customers to cut back by a 10% reduction, and that's voluntary at this point. It's not mandatory. So this table below shows how we're doing. So, and it compares last year, 2020, to our water consumption in 2021, and that's for all of our customers combined. So you can see in April of this year, we were actually 11% more than last year, but it was the end of April that we called the drought. And so you can see quickly our customers responded. It went down to 4%, and then we started getting less. So by June, we were 4% less than last year. And then at the top of our irrigation season, August, we were at 9% less than last year. So everyone did a really good job cutting back. It's dropping off a little bit. We're at about 5% less than last year. There's a little bit, people are probably turning off their irrigation. If you haven't done so, this is a good time to adjust your controller. We have shorter days and less, not as hot. So we're getting close to time to turn off the controllers. Just a few tips for things you can do at home. Find and fix your leaks, and I'll send you some links on how to do that. But leaks are it's just water down the drain. So if you haven't had a chance to do that, this is a good time to look into that. Install efficient devices such as shower heads and faucet aerators, and we have free devices for that. I'll be sending you a link on how to obtain those. But at a 1.8 gallon per minute shower head, you really don't lose anything. It's still plenty of water. Interesting fact, if we all took 5-minute showers, everyone in our service area, and that's actually a pretty long shower, I'm cutting back from the average, which is 8 minutes, we would save 2 million gallons a day in our service area. So it's an easy way to kind of save some water. And then look for ways for reducing water in your landscape. And then everyone who has an account can sign up for My Water Report. And this is a portal where you can set leak alerts. You can look at your water use and compare it from year to year and irrigation season from year to year. It gives you customized helpful tips for you at your home. And you can pay your bills and all kinds of helpful stuff. So I'll send you a link to that too. All right, moving on to our Save Our Water, Save Our Trees. Today we're joined by Gabrielle Trudeau. She's a community forest coordinator and International Society of Agriculture certified. And Gabrielle, take it away.
Thank you so much, Kristin. Let me just turn up my volume, make sure everyone can hear me. Yeah, so I've been a certified arborist for about 3 years now, and I've been in the urban forestry industry for about 8 years now. All right, so today I'm going to share with you guys some information about Canopy, but mainly I want you guys to take away all of these tips because they are applicable throughout California, because it's all about water conservation tips for having trees in your landscape. All right. Canopy's mission is to grow the urban tree canopy of the Mid-Peninsula communities for the benefit of all. With 25 years of providing tree planting and stewardship, I will share with you the best tips for water-wise tree care and how we engage and educate communities to protect our urban forests and safeguard our water resources. All right. All right.
Gabrielle, you can always say next slide too when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. All right, through workshops, web series, and volunteer opportunities, and online resources, I'm going to invite you all to become part of this community. Hopefully, after this presentation, you will be excited to work with trees and view them as an asset in a water-wise landscape. Next slide. So the first tip I'm going to share with you guys is know your trees, know their needs. Trees are the most valuable element of our green infrastructure because of the benefits that they provide and the investment that they represent. Urban trees combat climate change, enhance public health, and contribute to vibrant, sustainable communities. Additionally, they represent a water-efficient investment. A well-managed urban forest saves more water than it consumes. Okay, next slide. Different trees have different water and care requirements. To determine how much and how often your tree needs water, consider the following. One consideration is the species. Look up your tree's species and also their watering needs on Canopy's tree library. For help identifying your tree, you can also contact Canopy. We have a tree hotline where you can just send a photo and say, hey, can you help me ID this tree? You can also use resources, free public resources such as the Urban Tree Key. And there's a book by Matt Ritter called A California's Guide to the Trees Among Us. And it features 150 of California's most common urban trees with an easy to use identification key. So first, you just want to know what species you're working with. Another consideration is the age. So young trees require more frequent watering, but less volume of water than mature trees. And you can also get this from checking out our tip for caring for young trees. So that link will get you for trees that are less than 5 years old, and then Canopy's watering guidelines for mature trees and species-specific watering needs. And then I believe these links should be accessible at the end of the presentation or when the presentation gets sent out. Another consideration is the health. Thank you. A stressed tree may require more water than a vital tree. If your tree is in poor condition, consider hiring a certified arborist. Canopy has a list of local companies and arborists that are certified in performing tree work in the Bay Area, but you can also go to the International Society of Arboriculture, or ISA, .org. You can go to their website also and type in your zip code, and it'll populate arborists in your area that are certified. So something else to consider is the soil type. Water needs will also be affected by your soil type. For example, clay soil does not accept water easily, but it holds on to water longer. And other site conditions to consider are factors like sun exposure, surrounding plants, and nearby water sources. That will all influence watering needs for trees in the landscape. Next slide. So these are two images of irrigation's do's and don'ts. So I'm gonna go over things to do for trees and water, and then practices that we don't recommend for water and trees. So the image to the left has soaker hose laid out in a circular manner around the tree. It's that black tube that's laid on the ground. So that is a do, because you can kind of imagine that they cut away the grass from the tree. And so in order to make up for the water that the grass was providing, they put a soaker hose down. So now they can remove the lawn or make that circle larger, but they're not sacrificing the water that the tree is used to receiving. The image to the right is a don't. So you can see that they have cemented this tree in, and so therefore it takes an extra amount of resources to pump. So this guy is injecting water through the cement to irrigate that tree. So just putting into perspective the things we do in our landscape that are beneficial to trees and things that make it difficult for us to maintain trees. Next slide, please. Okay, irrigation do's. Do water a tree once a week for the first year after planting. Do practice deep water basin watering to establish deep roots. And so any tree that is planted within the first year will require 10 or 15 gallons a week for that first year, regardless of the species. It's just getting the roots established. So that's something to keep in mind. Do water your tree during a drought. And do use Canopy's tree watering guidelines if you know the species that you have and it's already established tree. I really like that because you put in your species into the guidelines, and it'll tell you how much per inch diameter of water that tree will require. So that's kind of a neat tool. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Could you go return to the last slide for one more? So two other things I wanted to mention for irrigation do's that I didn't write on this slide is also consider your laundry to landscape for watering trees. So that way, you know, you're creating that just to keep a couple of trees on the landscape. And do also consider putting your tree on a separate watering valve or system from your lawn and other landscape shrubs, because trees require a different watering cycle. They want deep watering infrequently. So that's another consideration for the landscape. Okay, next slide. Thank you. Irrigation don'ts. Don't stop watering your tree when you stop watering your lawn. Don't stop watering your tree when we are in a drought. Don't just rely on sprinklers for establishing a tree. Sprinklers will make a tree most likely develop surface roots. So that's why you want to deep water it at first, those first 3 to 5 years. And do not water established native oaks in the dry summer months. Our oaks are accustomed to the water cycle of California, and if you do the combination of hot with wet, that's not anything that the native species like. So natives only want it one of two ways, either cold and wet or hot and dry. So if you're working with native species, keep that in mind, and that's why you water as much as you can in the wet season, and then you want to make it so that you can wean the tree off of the water for the summer, so it just hunkers down. However, that only applies to established trees, older trees. New trees will require to be watered the full year. All right, next slide, please. Now I'm going to talk a little bit about young tree care. Once you have incorporated a tree or multiple trees into your landscape, here are some tips for proper care. Next slide. Okay, so you want to regularly check your tree for a flattened watering basin. This watering basin makes sure that the water stays on the root ball of the tree, as it simultaneously allows the water to sink down to encourage roots to grow downward, rather than letting the water run off into the surrounding landscape. The image to the left illustrates the watering basin. You see how it was like a donut was built around the tree, again, to not let that water run off into the landscape and to focus it on going down into the root ball of the tree. And then another thing you want to check your tree for is always pay attention to where the drip line is. So the drip line is the point at which the water falls over the edge of the tree's leaves. It creates a natural and quite literal drip line. It's the area in the soil where the tree's most absorbent roots exist. So as you can see, if you can imagine rain coming down on the tree to the right, that's where the water would trickle off of the leaves and land on the ground. So that's what we call the drip line. And that's where, if you mirror image right below, that's where the tree's most absorbing roots will be. So that's where you want to target the water, and also consider when you're building the basin, you kind of would, the ideal basin would be right on the outside of the drip line to capture that water. So you also want to check your tree for compacted soil. So if the soil looks dry and cracked, you would like to add mulch to revitalize it. Dried and cracked means it's getting exposed and it's just getting baked by the sun. So we want to avoid that because that means there's no moisture in that soil. You want to also regularly weed your tree. Weeds compete for nutrients with the tree, so it's important to keep the area inside of the drip line free of weeds or competing plants. Anything inside of the tree's drip line, as in closer to the trunk, is going to compete for nutrients with the tree, especially when it is young. So we want to weed outside. Everything under the drip line needs to be weeded under the tree, ideally. Next slide. So this is mulch. It's a nice visual, or wood chips. I hope Rolando is having an easier time translating mulch. But yeah, so I'll talk to you guys a little bit about the benefits of mulch and how to utilize it for water conservation. Next slide. All right, besides proper watering, the best thing you can do for your tree is to apply mulch over its root system from the trunk until the drip line. Properly applied mulch insulates the roots from extreme temperatures, slows soil moisture evaporation, reduces water use, reduces soil compaction, releases nutrients from the soil as the mulch breaks down. So it's acting like a natural fertilizer. And it provides a buffer protecting the tree from mowers and also soil compaction of people walking under the drip line. So it has all of those benefits when properly applied. Next. So this image, I wanted to point out the drip line again, so that in case you missed the last visual, you understand. And the background images are so you get that the established tree to the left, the mulch is going from the trunk all the way out. So they have to make the circle match the drip line of that. And then the image to the right has a smaller circle. We can, if you play along with me, you would picture that the canopy of this tree should be mirrored to the circle of the mulch. It's just to give you guys an idea of what we mean by put mulch under the tree from the trunk to the drip line. Another thing to consider is you also don't want the mulch directly touching the trunk of the tree. The bark of the tree is kind of like our skin, so moisture constantly up against it will cause it to fall off. So that's just one small thing. It's up to the trunk, not completely on it, and then out to the drip line. Okay, next slide, please. You want to use organic matter such as wood chips with or without leaf matter. Trees actually prefer wood chip mulch and the duff created by their own leaves. That's their ideal, what they want under their drip line. You want to apply a mulch layer of 3 to 5 inches deep, or 1 inch deep if you're using spray irrigation. And you want to make sure it extends at least as far as the drip line. You also want to say no to mulch volcanoes. Mulch should have a donut distribution, not a volcano shape. If it's a volcano shape like the image to the left, it'll trap heat near the trunk and not allow airflow to cool that area off, because mulch is a little hot just from sitting on the ground versus grass, you know. And so it could cause decay and other bugs and whatnot to develop on the inside of the tree near the trunk where the volcano is blocking airflow. So you want it to look like a donut. So that's what we mean by that explanation. If weed persists, place a layer of newspaper, cardboard, or biodegradable weed cloth fabric underneath the mulch. So that's how you can save from having to weed constantly. Also, if you use either of the newspaper or the cardboard, they also provide organic matter additionally to the soil. So they break down over time, but you get that added benefit. And you want to replenish the mulch layer every spring, just as the natural rains taper off. And you will capture nature's water in the mulch, reducing the amount of irrigation needed in the dry months. The next tip I'm going to share with you guys is removing your lawns and how to help, if you're considering removing your lawn, how to help your tree transition. It may look tidy, but traditional turf can suck up a lot of water without offering much in the way of environmental benefits. Next slide. You can help your tree transition in the following ways. So if you're deciding to remove your lawn, consider the following options. Trees that are surrounded by lawn, they develop shallow roots and are accustomed to frequent shallow watering. They can adapt, but they will need time to adjust to a less frequent, deeper watering pattern. Since more than half of outdoor water is used on lawns, removing your lawn or letting it go golden or substituting it with drought-tolerant native grasses can help lower your landscape water use. An example is a tall red fescue mix. So if you still wanted to keep your lawn, you could switch it out for a more drought-tolerant lawn species that would use about 1/3 of the water. And a tall red fescue mix is a native grass that has a billowy green kind of flowy. If you look at the background image to the left at the top, that's what that fescue would look like. You want to also check your local water district for rebates for lawn removal. Some do. So wherever you're living, just look at your local water company and see what kind of rebates they may offer. Kristin mentioned that she would say the ones that EB Mud has at the end of this presentation. So that's exciting. Make a watering plan for your tree by using Canopy's tree watering guidelines. Use mulch liberally to help with this transition. And then consider installing a drip system. So those are the things, and I put the last two in a different color because those are the two big things you can do to help trees in the landscape. You can mulch underneath their drip line and cut out the lawn because that'll help conserve water and all the benefits I listed. And or you can install a drip system, which would then help your tree transition. And there's an image of what that could look like in the lower right picture. You see the brown dirt and there looks like there's some brown lines in it. So that would be laying out a grid drip system that then you would cover with mulch, and the tree wouldn't notice the difference because you'd be then applying the water directly to it. You've just removed the overhead spray essentially. And then you would cover that with mulch. Okay, and this is the last tip for today. You want to plant drought tolerant trees. Planting new trees to replenish the urban forest is more important than ever. To prepare for a hotter, drier future, however, it is important to plant the right tree. Next slide. Establishing resilient and drought tolerant trees. Selecting an appropriate species is important in achieving this goal. So in California, for example, it would be a drought tolerant species, right? So that would limit your selection. And then depending on where you live, you would then modify your search even from that. Also, you could base it on your soil type and all of the tips I mentioned earlier. You also want to research the species that you will be working with. You want to make sure that you know exactly what you're working with, again, so that you know it will perform well wherever you're planting it. There are resources online like Select Tree and Canopy's tree library that tell you things like climate zone, drought tolerance, root damage potential, utility friendliness, which means a tree that is small and would grow under utility lines comfortably without having to be topped. And also if it is prone to pests and diseases. It also lists one of the most important things, the height and width of a tree. You want to plant for maximum height and width when you're installing. So you always, even though it seems daunting to put a 50-foot tree that's only about six feet tall, you want to make sure that you account for that space it will eventually take up. Because trees planted in locations unsuitable for them is the #1 reason that they are removed from the urban setting. So you always want to use the maximum height and width when fitting a species to a planting location to keep that, to ensure that that tree will be there for many, many years, because there's no conflict why it can't grow fully in that space. The next is you want to also plant correctly. Properly planting a tree will affect how well a tree can perform its functions in nature, including things like drought tolerance and water uptake. Therefore, it's important to do it right. So for knowing proper planting techniques, I put here, the link would be to Canopy's How to Plant a Tree video. However, there are quite a few of properly planted trees, so videos. So I might just check out videos offered by urban forestry nonprofits. So in the North Bay, I believe it's Friends of the Urban Forest. Canopy would cover Mid-Peninsula, and then South Bay would be Our City Forest. So I would look for videos from nonprofits that work with trees for proper technique. And then you can also consider volunteering with these organizations so that they can show you how to properly plant a tree. So those are two different access points so that you're doing it correctly. Because sometimes a tree will underperform and it's not for any other reason than just planted improperly. All right, and then you want to select the right tree for the right place. You want to determine the purpose for the tree in the landscape. For example, is it for shade? Is it for privacy? Do you want fruit from it? Is it to add an accent? These are things to consider. You want to determine if there's any utility conflicts, overhead or underground. That's usually if you're planting in the front of a house, there's underground utilities to consider. Side and backyards don't have that consideration typically. But yeah, so you want to consider below and above ground. Also, the proper location will affect how long the tree survives in the urban setting, like I mentioned. Right now, the average lifespan of a tree is about, in the urban setting is about 30 years. So we want to maximize this with proper location and species selection to maintain that standard and to hopefully increase it. Like maybe the average could be 40 or 50 eventually if we do all these practices. Next slide. So now I'll talk a little bit about how trees help conserve water. So those are all the tips for incorporating trees into your landscape. Now we'll focus on the benefits of the trees with water. So urban trees help regulate surface temperatures. They filter out pollutants. They produce oxygen for us to breathe. Thus, they enhance public health. They hold water and ensure cloud formation to avoid droughts. They provide shade, combat climate change through carbon sequestration, and contribute to vibrant, sustainable communities. Additionally, they represent a water-efficient investment. A well-managed urban forest saves more water than it consumes. They are also the only infrastructure that appreciates in value over time. During the last drought, we asked residents to take shorter showers and they turned off their landscape irrigation, which really impacted the urban forest. Trees are worth their water, so consider investing in trees. And then I wanted to say a case study here that I wanted to mention as far as if you're concerned about how much water a tree would consume from your household. So two things is one year in 2016, Canopy calculated how much it would cost to water a tree for 1 year in East Palo Alto, and it came out to about $25 a year. So with inflation and maybe taking some of the rates into consideration, that might be closer to $30 a year now. But in perspective of overall house expenses, that seems fairly small for a full year. Yeah, so that's one consideration. And also it's about 15 gallons is about 3 toilet flushes. So it's like having a guest over at your house once a week that uses your bathroom 3 times. If you want to kind of put into consideration how much water a tree takes up. So I would like to invest in trees, and you want to protect your investment by continuing to water the trees. And lastly, trees are a nature-based solution to climate change. Next slide, please. I put the image here of the water cycle. I just wanted to kind of connect trees back to the water cycle so everyone understands that they do play a role through transpiration and water uptake, slowing water down so that it can percolate into the aquifers. Also, it also filters the water before. So just trees have all sorts of benefits and they're directly related to water. So I'll go into more detail about each of these. Thank you. Here are ways that trees save water. They manage rainwater and storm events. Trees intercept rainfall with their leaves, which prevents water runoff and soil erosion and reduces the chances of flooding. They hold stream banks in place with their roots, reducing soil erosion, which prevents sediment from entering storm drains and streams. They help improve water quality. When water percolates down below the soil, the roots trap and absorb debris and contaminants and help break them down before the water reaches the aquifer, channel, or stream. They slow down water, which helps recharge aquifers. Slowing water down also helps water percolate more slowly into the soil, thus helping refill or maintain our aquifers. Their drought tolerance aids in water conservation. Drought-tolerant plants require less water, resulting in less frequent irrigation and associated costs. Drought-tolerant trees do not need irrigation once they become established. drought tolerant plants are less likely to experience stress during the hot summers, improving survival rates and removing the need for continuous watering of replacement plants. All right. So in summary, I'm gonna just talk a little bit about all the points I made throughout the presentation, kind of to try to drill everything home for you guys. So you want to maximize the water conservation of trees in your landscape. You want to plant the right tree in the right place, right? Select the tree suited to the site conditions and growing space without conflicts from utilities, paved surfaces, or buildings. You want to plant drought tolerant species with low water needs. You want to plant trees in your yard that retain trees on slopes and near waterways to contribute to improved water quality. So we want to incorporate as many trees as fit in our landscape when possible. And you want to apply a 3 to 4 inch layer of mulch under the drip line of trees and throughout the landscaped areas to retain soil moisture and also reduce watering needs. Okay, great. Awesome. So after you've learned all of those tips and recommendations, here are ways that, here's ideas to, if you're engaging with a community and you're trying to get others to work with trees, here are some things that Canopy has done that maybe you would want to also try to do, or you could maybe participate in some of these. All right. So we have online resources. We have that tree library, like I mentioned. We have the arborist list to hire an arborist. We have a watering guide, a tree hotline, and we also offer educational webinars. So visit canopy.org for your one-stop shop for most tree needs and educational items. We also offer in-person training. So you try to engage the residents while a tree is being planted. This has been kind of hard during the pandemic because we actually asked residents to stay inside their home while our volunteers plant. But that is one way to engage is, you know, if you're planting a tree somewhere, get the steward involved in the planting, then they'll be better equipped to care for that tree. We also visually demonstrate how to water. So if you can see, a standard bucket holds 5 gallons. So that helps someone visualize, oh, 3 buckets of water is what I need to add to the tree every week. You can also use a thing called a gator bag, which holds 15 gallons. And another tip for watering is if you have the bucket and you don't want to carry the water, you would put the hose in the bucket and time how long it takes to fill it. And then you would multiply that time by 3. And you would then lay the hose inside of the watering basin and run the water for that length of time so that you know it's 15 gallons. All right, and then we also, so the things we've done to our residents is we've provided with them a watering and a tree care brochure. They also have a timeline and instructions. We send emails and text reminders out every summer to remind people to not stop watering their trees. So we work with young trees. We always care for trees we've planted in the last 3 years. So though they will require watering until about 4 or 5 years before you wean them off. So we do remind everyone who we're caring for to water their tree every summer. And then we hang a banner up in Palo Alto in the overpass near Stanford University. And the banner says, "Is your tree thirsty? Visit canopy.org." So it's, again, just another visual point to remind people to think about their trees when we're going into the hotter months and thinking about reducing our water consumption. It's don't forget about the trees. And then in Palo Alto, we have a young tree care survey that we run every summer. It's essentially a health assessment, but we send out postcards to these residents who will have their trees surveyed. And it also reminds them to water their trees at the beginning of the summer. And with this survey, we also give all of the recommendations to the city for the things we need done on the trees. So we get the citizens to care for and make recommendations to the city. So That's one of our programs. And then also when we table in person, we always have our Save Our Water and Our Trees brochure, which covers everything mentioned in this presentation. So people feel confident taking care of trees and with water. They don't feel intimidated that trees are going to consume too much water and put us in a worse drought. So we're trying to debunk that. Trees help prevent droughts. And then we also have watering reminders on our tree news, as you can see the pun there. So that tree news, anybody can sign up for. It's just a newsletter that will go out about 2 or 3 times over the summer, just reminding you and giving you some care tips about your trees, and then just saying, hey, don't forget to water. So if you want those kind of reminders, you can just sign up for our tree news, and that goes out usually at the end of the wet season. Again, just to remind people to not neglect the trees with watering. Oh, okay. I think, oh, all right. I think there's one more slide. Maybe it just shows our buttons. And maybe Kristin wants to run a poll at the next slide. Yeah, this is what, if you go to our website, this is what our buttons would look like.
Great. So we just have one quick poll to help you synthesize some of what you just learned. If you could just take a minute, which statement is false? So you just want to click on the statement that is false. Thank you for responding. We'll give you just a couple more seconds here. And we're going to wow, thank you for your participation. We almost have everyone on that. Okay, so the question was, which is the false statement? Trees reduce carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. Trees help to improve water quality. Water California native oak trees in the summer, or mulch up to the tree drip line to conserve soil moisture. Maybe I didn't say that one right. Poll. Share results. So what I was shooting for was water California native oak trees in the summer as the false statement. We did talk a lot about watering trees in the summer and not to forget them during the drought. With the exception of our native oak trees, and many native species don't like water in the summer. They're adapted to a wet winter and a dry summer. So you do want to know your tree species before you take on your watering schedule for your tree, because the natives really don't like the summer water. So trees do reduce CO2 in the atmosphere, and that's why they help with climate change. Trees do help to improve water quality by bringing it down through to our aquifers to get clean and clarified. And then you do want to mulch your tree all the way up to the drip line, but not make a volcano and not around the trunk itself. Thank you for participating.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kristin. So here's just some of the links. But with that, I think I'm done with the presentation. Also, thanks, Rolando, for translating. And I'll just send it back to Kristin if that's okay.
We're going to send all these links out to you as a follow-up. So all the incredible resources that Gabriel provided to help you with your tree care and identifying your plant trees and selecting trees that are appropriate for your size lot. Super important point. Let's try to get these trees to be 50 years old. Yeah, tree video on how to plant a tree successfully. We're going to send you all that information. And then if you just EB Mud as Gabriel mentioned, does offer landscape rebate program. So for folks who are interested in taking out their lawn, because it is the highest water use landscape type, and putting in something more climate appropriate, we do provide up to $2,000 per residential property and up to $15,000 for commercial, and that includes HOAs every 2 years. We have a standard, which is 75 cents per square foot. And then we have a super rebate, which includes compost, sheet mulch, 50% natives, and planting in the cool season. We also offer irrigation upgrades. Gabriel talked a lot about taking, that drip is actually better for the trees because it sends the roots down rather than having surface roots. So we do have rebates for converting your overhead spray to drip irrigation, if that's something you're interested in. I will be sending you out links on that. We have coupons, mulch and compost coupons with our nursery partners. I'll send you a link for that. And then again, just a quick summary on where we've been, and then we're going to go to Q&A. So we are in a drought. We're asking our customers to cut back 10%. It's a voluntary cutback. You may consider doing a 5-minute shower, fixing leaks, upgrading your aerators, reduce your outdoor water use, and log on to my water report. Many, many benefits to trees, shade, improve water quality, conserve water, reduce air pollutants, really beautify the neighborhood. For best care of your tree, you really do want to understand the species, your soil type, the age and health of the tree. Real quick, irrigation do's and don'ts. For mature trees, you want to water deeply and infrequently, and you don't want to water native species in the summer. Young tree care, maintain that basin to help the water percolate into the soil. You do want to weed it so the tree's not competing with other plants. Maintain the mulch, water more frequently with less volume than mature trees. And as Gabriel mentioned, about 15 gallons per week for those young trees. Mulch to the drip line, but not up to the bark. And then for transition your trees after lawn removal, you do want to create a tree watering plan, and also put your trees on a separate station, because your tree really does require a different watering schedule than your drought tolerant plants. And if you have a lawn, you definitely want them on different stations to help conserve water. You can find drought tolerant trees and many other characteristics of trees on the Canopy tree library. There's a whole lot of resources we're going to be sending you, and also take advantage of EV Mud resources, it rebates and coupons. Okay, we have many questions, Gabriel. Okay, are the trees on the list California natives? I guess they mean on, I'm not sure what that is, but I'm sure probably the Canopy list.
Yeah, the tree library. So some are native. So that's a great question. The thing about urban forestry is we have to keep so we're in a Mediterranean climate, and California has a lot of different ecosystems. So the ones that work for the urban setting is kind of a limited list, because they have to be like more arid and etc. So we have a certain amount of natives that do work in our urban setting. However, if we only planted natives, then and a disease struck one of those species, we could lose that whole percentage of the canopy in the city. So one urban forestry practice is we try to keep the tree species to be 10% per 10-mile radius, so that if a disease strikes that species, we're only losing 10% of the canopy at a time. So trees are the only way we're getting oxygen into our cities. So we have to take that in consideration. So we incorporate trees from the whole world that are from Mediterranean climates, that do well in an urban setting, that are drought tolerant because they're from a Mediterranean climate, and they do well. So that's why they're not all native. They're all just trees that do well in an urban setting and are drought tolerant and are Mediterranean and work well here. So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. What about drip irrigation in rings around plus stakes with drip irrigation inside it? For surface plus deep, how many stakes?
Yeah, I don't really understand the stake question, but rings around the tree is a good idea with drip line. Yeah.
Okay. Any special tips on redwood trees that are really looking poor?
Oh yeah, I love this question. So I think I've seen this in homes around here, but I love it when they wrap misters around the trunks of the tree. So redwoods absorb most of their moisture through their bark. That's why they're unique and they only exist here in the whole world because of our fog. So they're absorbing through their bark as they go up. And so in order to kind of simulate that microclimate, you could wrap a mister around the bark of your redwood and run the misters. Often they're essentially a type of drip watering. And if you can also hang out below them, then you get the cooling off in the summer and you're misting the redwood. But I've seen redwoods really respond positively to misters wrapped around their trunks.
Okay, mention that some guidance isn't useful in the high wildfire risk areas. Some of these tips are dangerous in high wild risk areas, at least. Oh, the 3 to 5. Okay. Yeah, there's concern about using wood chips in high wildfire risk zones. And I'll answer that question. You do want to work with your local fire department on their codes. And you're right, there's different codes based on where you're located and if you're in a high wildfire risk zone. What we've heard is that composted mulch, if you are going to use a mulch, composted mulch is probably the best. Has a little bit more moisture, it's a little bit more degraded, moving more towards compost, and you want to stay away from bark because that would be more flammable. But check if you are concerned about that, do check with your local fire department. Do you have a good source for being able to diagnose a health disease of a tree? Like, why is it getting multitudes of white flies? Why are the leaves getting sticky?
Yeah, so again, for those detailed questions, you could take some photos and send them to canopy.org for us to ID and diagnose. Or you could check out our hire an arborist. So I would look, you can go to try to hire an arborist. Some companies come out and do free inspections or they'll do free consultations but you have to ask them. So not all of them. And then the standard rate for an arborist is about $50 an hour. So that just everyone knows kind of what you're getting into when you're hiring that service. But that's kind of what you would want if you're trying to find out that specific. But if you knew exactly what species you were talking about, that would also maybe help just looking up resources. And some species have a more tendency to develop these things. When you're talking about white flies and whatnot, sometimes that lets me know maybe too much moisture and is in the shade a little much for that species. But again, I'd have to know exactly what you're talking about. So yeah, I would just have maybe a consulting arborist come out. And like I said, some of them do free inspections or send photos over to those people to diagnose. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question in drought. We need to water even drought tolerant trees. Is that correct?
That is correct. So that's I guess one thing I want to clarify is when you first install a plant or plant something, for the first 3 to 5 years of that plant's life, it's going to want regular water, depending, but not really depending on, like, the species doesn't matter so much at first. You're just getting the roots established of that tree. Then that's when the species matters. Once it's in the ground about 2-3 years, the species then comes into play. So more drought tolerant species can then start to get weaned off, more water loving, has a different regimen that is applied. So that's the two differences. When you first plant something, it needs to get water to be established. And then you reflect on once it's established, so about 3 years of constant watering, more or less, then you practice changing up the regimen based on the species. I hope that clarifies it. So yes, water year round for the establishing species.
Can you mention some urban garden sized drought trees?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, they're just looking for some urban gardens. So like oaks get to be way too big for an urban setting. Like what are some trees with canopies that are less than 20 feet at maturity that would be good for, that are drought tolerant?
Oh, okay. So there's some very charming California natives like Ceanothus or California lilac. They're 10 to 12 foot bushes that also are considered trees. That Toyon, Heteromeles arbutifolia is another native that stays about 10 feet. And then Cerces occidentalis, or Western redbud, again, a small native that's about, maxes out at about 15 feet. Yeah, so those are three. There's also probably,
Silkwood.
yeah, Catalina cherry. That's also a small one. So small, and also anything that is dubbed utility friendly, what that means is it's about 20 feet or shorter, so that it wouldn't go into the power lines. So you could plant a utility friendly tree next to a garden bed, knowing it won't provide the shade shade your garden. Eventually, it would just be a nice addition.
If street trees only have a small area of soil near the trunk, do we want to apply the water here? Is it okay? The drip line is under concrete and asphalt.
Yeah, that is okay. As long as the tree is getting water. Yeah, that's sometimes the situation it's in. There are plastic basins that I've seen some places install around the tree's trunk. It's just like a plastic bowl that they've used to kind of, again, when they put water in it, it holds it in place. That's something I've seen. But if the soil area is smaller than the drip line, that's the only place you have to water. So.
Okay, I have a number of acacias that are very stressed and several have died. They are over 30 years old. Currently, there is no irrigation on the slope. Would it be worthwhile to put drip around the old established stressed acacias? Otherwise, what should I do? Cut down and replace?
It would be, I think it's always worth, so when you're changing the water regimen or applying a treatment like mulch, these are like holistic approaches. So you want to try it and then monitor for about 3 months or maybe even 6 months, see if they recover. So I would lay down the drip line, cover the drip line in mulch to make the water more efficient that way, and observe the trees and see if they recover in 3 to 6 months. Then I would reassess. If you don't see the recovery in that window, then you could assess removal, but always try to save before you go for removal. Because every year a tree is alive, it does its benefits tenfold, 10 times every year. So if they're already established acacias that are just struggling, they're contributing to carbon sequestration and oxygen production, et cetera, near your home. So you might as well try to keep those alive rather than starting from scratch and losing all of that potential.
Okay, this might need a spreadsheet or something. I don't know if you can answer this easily, but I'll give you a try. Can you explain how exactly a tree on my property will conserve more water than it needs?
Yeah, so that's when you apply the mulch, because the mulch is gonna, so in California, we get this awesome, like at 4 or 5 a.m., this like dew. So the mulch will trap that dew and then it'll feed it back to the tree. And then whatever drip line or whatever water you're putting to the tree under the mulch, it'll help it from not evaporating. It'll just keep it on there. So mulch is the biggest way to you would add the required amount of water, but then say you forgot or left your home for a month, the mulch would have done the conservation of water for that tree for you. So that's why it's consuming less than it's requiring, if that makes sense. So it's the mulch mainly.
Is it also because the tree is helping the water move through into the aquifer? So you're actually putting water into the aquifer?
That could be true. I can't be super sure about that, but I just know that when you put mulch down, you're gonna be watering your tree less.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Is there a time, I was told the watering of the winter and spring has more important than water. Is there a time of year when more irrigation should be applied to a tree? I was told that watering over the winter and spring was more important than watering during the summer. Can you please clarify?
Yes, that is correct. It's like Kristin mentioned, I think that's working with, when you're working with a lot of natives or even Mediterranean species, they just like it wet and cold. So if you water them in the winter into spring, it's our coldish seasons, right? So they do like it wet then. But then when it gets dry, they don't want water because they like it just dry and hot, because water exacerbates the temperature of the ground. So in the winter, it's making it colder. And in the summers, if you add water to the ground, it can make the ground hotter, and then it ends up burning the trees. Not necessarily burning, but it can lead to root rot of hot water hitting the roots and sitting on there. So that's what you want to consider. So remembering the rule, wet and cold or hot and dry for Mediterranean plants is a good way to approach their care.
We are at time. Should we just do a couple more questions here? We'll do a couple more to round it out. And then we are at 2:04, so I want to keep to everyone's time frame. But we'll take a couple more, and then we will be signing out. And you do have Gabriel's contact info and our contact info and all the resources that we're going to provide. Is there a good maple tree that is drought tolerant and 30-ish feet? I've seen some on median strips I thought might be good.
I guess the short answer to that is yes. I think I can think of about 6 or so maples that are drought tolerant. And the scientific name for maple is Acer. So there's plants have 2 names, first and last name. So if you look for anything under the Acer with a drought tolerance tendency, you're going to find a maple that you like. They just come in different sizes and colors. So you just have to do a little bit of research. But yes, there are drought tolerant maples that work well here.
Okay. And do you know of any tree resources that help pay for tree trimming? Any kind of?
Oh, that's a great question. Yes. You want to go to your city. Public Works Department should have it. So most cities have tree ordinances that require people to have trees outside of their house. It's different per city, but this is how we maintain oxygen in our cities. And so based on those ordinances, there are services that your city should be able to provide at not necessarily free, but sometimes at a discounted rate. So say you wanted to get your tree trimmed, it could cost $2,000 through a private corporation. Or if you go through your city, sometimes the city can prune it for about $300 to $500. So you want to look at if there's permitting for pruning a tree. So if your city has permitting, sometimes it'll have a whole department dedicated to it, and then they could link you with the services that they pay, and you could get a better rate. So I would go first ask your Public Works Department and try to approach companies that prune through them.
Excellent. Thank you, Gabrielle. And this is the last question. I was told to leave a hose on, barely on, all night long to deep water. I really don't want to leave water on all night long. Can I just pour 15 gallons on a mature tree as long as it doesn't run off?
Yes, but again, I would recommend if it's mature, it might want a little more water, say 20 to 30 gallons or so, and infrequently, maybe once every 3 months. So that's where I would just recommend using Canopy's watering guide and putting in your species of that tree and the guesstimated age of that tree, and it should tell you what kind of water regimen to put that one on. But the trickle all night is a little too much. So you can trickle it into a bucket and see how long it takes to fill that bucket, and again, times 3, and that's how long you really should run the trickle. Sorry, Kristin.
Okay, well, thank you so much. We got to most of the questions, and we're going to be sending you lots of resources, and maybe we'll have to have a tree talk where we can just have tree specialists answer questions the next time. or do a tree office hour where people can bring their questions to the office hour. But today we're signing off. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you, Gabriel.
Yeah, thank you guys. This was really fun. Hope you guys learned a lot today.